And let me just get the first of these pictures ready. I was going to do here. So, okay, got it here. Second. What I'm going to do here, again, the subject matter I was saying was an Olio, and it comes up all the time in the New York crossword. I try to do the New York Times crossword puzzle every night, and I'm almost at the 4-year mark of never missing one, so I get really some nights. But Olio comes up a lot, and I've never had a chance to use it. But this is going to be a real mishmash. We're going to be running back and forth in years and places and everything. Just a little bit on my workflow, if there was such a thing. It's more like work explosion. What I was doing when I first started doing all the pictures, I had my scanner attached to the computer. I'd scan a picture, I'd restore it, I scan the next picture and restore it. And I realized I'm never ever going to get that done, because it would take about maybe 4 minutes or so to scan it, and then 20 minutes or so to restore it. So, you know, my time factor was the restoring part. Well, I started realizing if I just scan and scan and scan, I could be on something else, watching a movie or doing something and just scan, 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 and end up with all these raw scans. And then I could restore them and sit here with this, doing the computer, hit scan, just go back and forth. I realized I'm never going to get them all scanned, so I'll buy a second scanner. So I kept scanning. Now I've got zillions and zillions of raw pictures not scanned. And what I was doing originally was, first in, first out. I'd scan it, restore it, scan it, restore it. And then after a while, I realized I'm spending all this time restoring crap pictures of the same thing I've seen 100 times. And I've got this sort of neat one I haven't done before. So now periodically when I'm just stuck on a Zoom call for something else or watching TV or whatever, I'll go back into the thousands of raw images and restore a few. So the common theme is for today is pictures that I've restored during 2022. I looked at it and said, I think there were about 585 of them so far this year. We're not going to see them all, so everybody doesn't have to worry about missing dinner. But I just grabbed a couple bunches of them and go through them. So let's see how I know Olio. Oh, recipes, yeah, it's funny, going back to crossword puzzles. It used to be a word that came up all the time, ADIT, ADIT. And if you don't know what it is, it's an opening to a mine shaft, and it was always in crosswords. Well, now the New York Times has another puzzle where they give you a bunch of letters and you're supposed to make words out of them, and they don't know the word ADIT. So it's like, the guys that do the crossword puzzles use ADIT, the guys that do this other word puzzle don't. So it's the left and right hand. Anyway, I'm going to start with some of LA here. Let me share screen. And then after this, we'll take a vote and see where we want to go next. But I just happen to have this up and handy. Oh, and now I got to remember, let's go. It was Control Shift M, was it?
I think H.
Okay, Control Shift H.
Yeah, we're not seeing the box here, though.
Oh, you're not seeing the box. Okay,
Yeah.
if you don't see the box, that's fine. Again, just random pictures. I'm seeing the box. Let me get it out of my way here. This one I got a kick out of PWA Jetstream, the Siesta sleeper seats. Again, how things changed. It was a big thing to be advertising back then about nonstop to the East Coast. So, big change of how movies go. And if we zoom in on it, try to see, I'm trying to remember what movie this was. I did figure it out. Well, do it another time.
Again, by the way, why is that called the Chinese theater?
They were all sorts of themed theaters in Hollywood at the time. You had the Egyptian theater, the Chinese theater, anything to make your theater look different from the others. So the Egyptian theater had all sorts of, obelisks and things like that. And Sid Grumman did the Chinese theater just for tourist attraction value. It's still there today. Now it's, it was Grauman's Chinese Theater, Mann's Chinese Theater. I don't know who the hell owns it now, but it's still there. And, still going to look at all the signatures and everything in the courtyard.
The lobby's gorgeous, too.
Yeah. And this is what, again, Disney copied for the great movie ride down at, Walt Disney World. Again, one of the more famous theaters in the world. Then this one's the one I did about a week or so ago. It's Queen Mary. I was doing working on a project for the people that are currently trying to restore the Queen Mary and trying to get them some historical pictures that they can put up and do fundraising. This is a plaque aboard the ship of the original Queen Mary. And this is another one from that same thing, set of the flags on the Queen Mary. And, it's been in Long Beach for years. If you've been following the story, it's rusting away and having all sorts of issues. It's been closed since the pandemic. The city of Long Beach, they said to do a full restoration is going to be $278 million, which they don't have, but they've put about $3 million into it to stabilize. So again, I'm just trying to help the folks with their effort. This next batch, kind of interesting. The MGM movie lot before it was torn down. This was always a fascinating spot to me. When I first got out here in 1976, part of the lot was still standing, and I was able to sneak my way on it and get look around. But it was a fantastically large lot, and if you're not in the movie business, the way it basically works is you make a movie, you build a set, and if your contract doesn't say you have to tear it down, you save the money of not tearing it down, because the next guy can either use it, or if he needs that space, he can pay you to tear it down. So a lot of these sets get really worn and torn up over the years. This one in particular got really worn and torn up because they did a TV show called Combat there. And Combat, the guys would go into a village, they'd blow it up, and then they'd have to come back and rebuild it, that sort of thing. So there was Western streets out there. Some of the famous houses, you had all the Andy Hardy movies and other things made out there. Meet Me in St. Louis and some of those. Again, really fascinating to see all this because you're in LA, but you've got all these ancient buildings from the middle of the country type of architecture, and now it's all a housing development. But if you watch the TV show Combat, again, the number of times they fought and took over this bridge here is just astonishing. They went back and forth and left and right. Over on the right was a big basin, and they could flood it up there, have water coming under the bridge. And they were also used in other TV shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. They used it as a Swedish seaport, and they put a big sailing ship in there, and Napoleon and Ilya would go on it. But the trouble they had, they were shooting both shows at the same time, and they said The Man from U.N.C.L.E. crews would come in, look at a set, and decide, yeah, okay, that's the one we'll use for next week's episode. And in between, Combat would come and blow the top off a building, and it wasn't there, so they had to come in and rebuild it. So unfortunately, MGM is not with us anymore, and I've got a whole bunch of others I got to restore from it, but a little slice of Hollywood. So I'll give folks an option here. I've got a bunch of them I've been restoring recently, including some color shots from the '39 World's Fair. I got the San Francisco World's Fair, New York, Disneyland, Expo 58, 67, 86, Freedomland, HemisFair, Knott's Berry Farm, Knoxville, New York City, Seattle, and Disney World. So any particular thoughts of what people would like to see?
Why don't we start with 39?
Okay. Actually, before I do 39, I'm going to jump to one other here. It was just a real quick thing. Speaking of 39, I bought a whole bunch of pictures from the 1939 New York World's Fair, and there was a huge envelope of negatives in there of things from a U.S. military press a documentary film crew. And there's all sorts of things showing you how you load a cannon and how you stab somebody with a bayonet and all that sort of thing. But I found this picture in here of this plane into a building, and I was trying to figure out, was it a stage crash or whatever? And they have all sorts of pictures of the cockpit and then inside the barn and everything. So I put it on there's a Facebook group of all things wrecked airplanes and ships. So I put this on there, and is anybody able to tell me what it was? And they said, oh yeah, that's a Martin B-10 bomber. And the serial number, somebody said it crashed on this particular date, and the official military record said crashed at Slaughter, NB, which they thought meant New Brunswick, and they couldn't find anything about New Brunswick. So I went to newspapers, archives.com, and put in Martin B-10 Slaughter 1942, and up came this thing that these people in Pennsylvania had built this brand new barn, and inside they had their brand new truck. I'm thinking insurance, right? But they were out flying the B-10, and they lost one of the engines, and they came down and landed in a field. And unfortunately, the brakes didn't work. So they scattered across the field, smashed into the barn. The lady who lived in the farm is quoted as it was the most horrendous noise she ever had. And then the military had to come out and guard their bomber until they could get it out of there. But I just thought it was fascinating how you can find so much details on a sort of obscure photo. And again, if you zoom in on it, this was a very large size negative, so I had a lot of detail. But very off to the side here, you can see the little boy, the farm boy, and looking at, what do you tell the kids at school about it? But yeah, that was a Martin B-10. I thought I knew airplanes, and I had never seen or could recall the Martin B-10.
What is interesting is it looks like an old aircraft. It doesn't look new at all. If you look at it, if it just crashed, it unless there was some burning, which it doesn't show any sign of it. I mean, not very shiny. It looks very weathered, if you notice that.
It was. By this time, the plane was pretty much obsolete. It had been built basically in about 1937 or so, and the aircraft history had changed so much by 42 that was considered, but by this time they had the B-17 in production, and then there were the B-25. So this plane had been considered technically obsolete. I don't think it ever saw actual war service, and they were using it as a training aircraft for multi-engine training. And so it was not when they crashed it, it was repairable, and they decided not to repair it because, but again, by that point in time, they were getting ready to throw them away anyway.
But maybe that explains why the engine failed and the brakes failed. It was so old and so worn out.
Yeah. I've actually, I got to work more in this archives. There's some fascinating pictures in here of, guys setting up cannons there, and it's all over the place. They're down in the tunnels where they bring in giant shells into some of the gun placements, for the shore batteries. But then they're out showing how to safely ditch a plane at sea, how to get off a sinking ship in a lifeboat, how to stage a torpedo attack. There's about 125 pictures in there that were just kind of gratis because, I wanted the World's Fair stuff. So,
what was the model on this again, Bill?
Martin B-10.
B-10, huh? I'm looking for, oh, that's why. Couldn't find it there for a minute.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to New York, and I'm going to do New York and Seattle and San Francisco. So we'll start with New York. Again, some of these are from negatives, some of them are slides, some of them are prints. But these are the only thing in common is that these are ones that I've restored this year. I started looking at some of these I scanned back in like 2014. There were some in 2008. So excuse me, I got to get a dog off my lap here. She likes to spend her day there, but after a while my legs go numb. So anyway, this was the Swift meatpacking company. It was done theoretically to look like an airplane with one long building and then two wings that went on either side. I've tried to convince myself I see an airplane in it. I never have. But this was a fascinating thing. We could walk in, and they had a meatpacking plant right there on premises, and they would grind up meat and sausages and make hot dogs and everything. And you could walk into the restaurant and get the hot dog you had just seen made, or you could take home a package of various meats, and they came in a special World's Fair wrapper. And you could give out things of hot dogs or other Swift meat products to your friends. This is one I did about a week ago. I was recently got a large collection of about 350 color images from the fair, and I was really thrilled to find this one. I'm a big train fan. Carol joined us a few minutes ago, and she will attest to that. And the 39 World's Fair had a huge exhibit, Railroads on Parade, where they brought in all sorts of famous trains brought them out on the steam power. They did a thing out on a giant stage with an amphitheater, but they also had inside exhibits of trains, modern trains, old trains, and I had never seen any interiors of the exhibit. The photography at this point, they've mentioned in past talks, you needed a tremendous amount of light and a tripod. The film back at this time was like ASO, I think 25 was considered a fast film at that time. You know, now we have ASA, 800, 1600s, that sort of thing. It's really changed. But in this particular case, it was the John Bull. This was the steam locomotive built, I think it was 1837, if I remember right, for the New York Central Railroad, and it was retired, sent to the Smithsonian, and they built a replica, but this was the real one. The Smithsonian agreed to loan it to the World's Fair with the condition that it not be actually run. That time it was considered dangerous that the boiler may go. In later years, they did do a full restoration, and they brought the thing up to power and did run it on its own power. And it's in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's oldest surviving fully operative steam locomotive. So it's on display at the Smithsonian. But again, I was just thrilled to find some interior shots. I'm working on some others from it. In the background, you can see Railway Express, if anybody remembers that company. To date myself, when I went to college, we had to ship our foot lockers home at the end of college, of all the stuff we had accumulated. So we would go out to the local train station and stick our foot lockers with REA, and they would send that back down to Long Island. I'm a big fan of the sculptures of the 39 World's Fair. This is the time of Fates and Man. And in it, you see the fates are here. They're spinning a piece of yarn, which is the allegory for birth. Somebody's measuring it with his life, and at the end, the other figure is cutting it for death. So this is by the same fellow that did the statue that's in the Rockefeller Center in New York today. This was done out of plaster of Paris. It didn't survive the fair. In the background, the same thing with George Washington. But the fellow did make other copies of this, and one of them was at a place called Sterling Gardens in New York. I think Tivoli, New York was the town. And then he's got one somewhere in another state. I'm trying to remember where it was, but I mean, just a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. Another sculpture we have. They called him Joe the Strap Hanger. This was the USSR pavilion, and there was a big race between the Soviets and the US to see who would have the tallest pavilion at the fair. So when Joe came out real high and mighty up there, the US decided they would take the Trilon, the triangular structure over the theme structure, and put a giant United States flag on the top of it to make sure that nothing was higher than the US flag. But this is a good way to date pictures of the 39 fair, because they tore it down and took it back to Russia in 1940. They don't know if it ever actually got back there. There's talk that Joe was carved up melted down for scrap metal or whatever, and it was replaced by a section called the American Commons in the 40 season. Again, some of the color ones I'm working on, the DuPont Wonderful World of Chemistry. For me, having seen so many of these things in black and white for so many years, getting all these color shots has been really, really just fun to work on. The thing that's interesting is that they were Kodacolor slides, but some Kodacolor held up color better than others, because you can have the same film, but it depends who develops it, and if people are cheating on the chemicals and using them a little bit more to get another roll out of it for the next customer. So a bunch of these have turned pretty yellow, which is not really common that I've seen for a lot of other Kodachromes. But whoever did this batch of 39 World's Fair, that they had a really distinctive yellow tint to them. So I was very glad that I was able to get the blue sky and that back out. One of the things I do get a kick out of, again, let me just zoom in here. It's just how chic everybody dressed with their suits and hats and dresses and everything, things we don't see in our theme park experience today. This was an interesting one. This is a show done at the U.S. Pavilion. You can see part of it just off to the side there. And they had a giant courtyard, and they built this temporary stage out there to have a celebration of the building of Rockefeller Center. And this was done for the military. So if you happen to look, all these people have very, very nice, neat military haircuts. And I think there's about 10, 12 pictures in a shot where these gals are dancing with these giant balls and hold them up, and then they spell out the letters USA with them. But again, just kind of fun to see it all here. This kind of lets you date it to the 1940 season as they went to a more military theme as we were getting ready to go to war. Again, just I love the details of the way people dressed back then. You know, the hat's just so 40s, and you know, it's just this kind of a neat design. This was an interesting one. We can zoom in here. If we have any World's Fair fans here, so you think you've seen the fair, so we'll do a trivia contest and see if you won. Track this down to a specific date. I think it was in September of 1940, and it was American Legion Day at the fair. So I have all these pictures of American Legion legionnaires marching, posing, and doing everything. But here they're having a big stage show. And again, I was looking at this here. You think you've seen the fair, radio quiz, put it all together. American Legion, and again, the newspaper archives is a tremendous tool. I came up with the exact date for it. This is one I did early this week. This was outside the Ford Pavilion, and this is Samson and the Lion. All the flags up here are just symbols of transportation, because this was the transportation area of the fair. So you had a propeller, an airplane, that sort of stuff. In the very back, you can see the Ford Pavilion, and there's a Ford car going around that they would take you around with a Ford driver and show you just how well Ford cars handled, and the amazing invention they had just come up with of air conditioning, and how you'd like to go home and buy yourself a nice air-conditioned Ford.
That's beautiful.
Carol always gives me a hard time about my love for Wonder Bread or white bread, or the fact that she'll say, do you realize just how long this stuff lasts, and you know how much of it is actual bread and how much is preservatives. But so this combined a few of my loves of Wonder Bread and you know, all that sort of thing. And also look at all the Boy Scouts. They're out there. Mentioned in prior talks how the Boy Scouts would actually stay at the fair, stay overnight at a village out there, and then give tours of their pavilion. So there's a whole bunch of them out here marching around, and Wonder Bread Bakery. And they actually bake bread there, and Hostess, again, poor Carol knows I live on Hostess cupcakes and donuts and stuff like that. They actually baked it out there, and you can imagine as you walk by the pavilion, the smell of fresh bread all day long, I'm sure lured a lot of people inside. Time capsule. They buried the time capsule at the very beginning of the fair. So this is actually a replica that's hanging there. You can see the gold thing in the center. The 39 capsule sunk down. It's still there today. There's a monument in the fairground over it. If you go to the fairgrounds today, there's a big round granite disc, and then the one that was put there for the '64 fair is about where this guy is standing, looking in the display case there. So that the replica that's hanging there shows you it's got a glass cutaway showing you what's in it. That is still in existence today and gets charted out to various museums and shows so that you can see what was in it. And they picked 5,000 years from now, they're going to dig it up. So I don't know if in 5,000 years anything will be left. Wonder if 5,000 years anybody remember where it is, or with global warming, it might be they'd have to go diving for it. The Japanese pavilion was intended to be a permanent gift to the city of New York, a sign of the friendship between New York and Japan. So when the fair was torn down, the Japanese pavilion was left there. And then the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, and all of a sudden anything Japanese became very, very bad. and people kept trying to set fire to the ruins of the pavilion, and finally the city tore it down because it was a tremendous eyesore. But this was all built in Japan, brought over here by native, craftsmen, put together, and supposedly I've got a lot of pictures of the interior. Beautiful buildings. Too bad it didn't exist. General Electric, they had a great display of man-made lightning, which they later took that and moved the man-made lightning equipment to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I worked for General Electric Ordnance Systems, and General Electric Transformers was next door to us. And they would fire up the man-made lightning bolt generators and test what happened if a lightning bolt hit a transformer. They would also bring in wings of airplanes and zap them with lightning to see what would happen, would it burn a hole through it or whatever. But they had basically to give us all notice that they were firing this thing up, and we had to turn off all of our computers and shut down anything that was sensitive, because it sent so many ground currents rippling throughout the entire electrical system of that part of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, that you didn't want to have anything of value turned on because it might surge and blow out. But we'd go out to the parking lot and they would just blast things. And again, the same exact equipment came from the 39 World's Fair. The last I knew, they were still blasting things with it. The main mall, again, the Trilon, that's where they stuck the American flag later to be taller than the USSR pavilion. Again, all these statues were plaster of Paris. None of them survived the fair, which is a great shame. Another view, we have a New York World's Fair maintenance truck driving along the road there. You can see the perisphere kind of ripples in the surface. It was originally supposed to be smooth concrete. They found out how much that was going to cost. They went to gypsum. Gypsum, being water soluble, was a constant maintenance nightmare for them. And this is, again, the sort of thing that gets fun. I'd like to share some of these things on Facebook and that. And I posted this one. I had heard of McGinnis of Sheepshead Bay. It had been a fairly popular restaurant. I used to go fishing out of Sheepshead Bay with my grandfather. And at times it was talk that McGinnis was going to be the next Howard Johnson's. A whole bunch of Hollywood celebrities invested in it. George Raft got the rights to expand to the West Coast to build a chain of McGinnis's restaurants. And then World War II came by, and all of a sudden, you couldn't do these things because you couldn't get supplies and that sort of thing. So I posted this on board, and a whole bunch of people were like, "Oh my goodness, I've heard of McGinnis, but I've never seen a picture of it at the fair." And it's just one of those things that just happens to pop up. Famous foods and liquors, serving Rupert. And you have to, again, Rupert, well, that's a beer that was big in Brooklyn in 1940 and doesn't exist today. The administration building, right in the front, Grand Central Parkway, and fair was supposed to be for 1 year in 1939. So they came by, and when they did it for the second year, they put up the wording on the building. Another way you can date these things. The New York City Pavilion is still there today. It's the Queens Museum. During the fair, Mayor LaGuardia actually moved his office from City Hall out to the fair. That was his way of making sure that all the New York politicians that wanted to have anything to do with city business had to come and spend some time at his fair. So it's, I guess it's still there today. It's got the diorama, the model from the '64 World's Fair. This is one I just restored last night. I bought an album from somebody of pictures, black and white prints, and unfortunately I've gotten very waterlogged and very water damaged. And again, with Photoshop, thankfully you can do all sorts of fun on it. But I have a lot of pictures of the communications building from afar, and this one I got a kick out of. I spent the time with it because it showed an awful lot of detail. And if you zoom in on it, you can start seeing they have the names of different pieces of music down there. Other plots, they have the artist's name, that sort of thing. And again, this was in terrible shape, and I was really happy how it was able to come out cleaning up. But all the artwork and all these frescoes and everything were done, some of them by very famous artists and others got these jobs, did it for next to nothing, and became famous as a result. So I'm just you know, sad that some of them didn't survive after the fair. So we're going to jump 3,000 miles to the other side of the country, and just got two quick ones here. I started restoring a bunch of color pictures from the 1939 Golden Gate International Exposition. And this fair was really kind of interesting. You had all the big money going to New York for the Trilon and Perisphere and these giant structures, and General Motors had Futurama, all that sort of thing. Well, there wasn't the same amount of money to be done for the Golden Gate International Exhibition. But one of the things they really, to my way of thinking, they really excelled was the beauty of it. They went with a color scheme, and they changed it between 39 and 40. You know, everybody has to improve things, but they really went out of their way to come up with lighting techniques. And they used a whole variety of things with arc lighting, incandescent lighting, neon lighting, all sorts of things to give you a different look for it. So in this particular one, you have the statue here, and she's got the moon and the clouds up there. In the back, you had what was called the temple compound. It was styled after buildings in Cambodia and that. And I just really, again, if you stop and think about how much light film needed back then, trying to get color photography at night was a really difficult chore for these folks. And here's another one I just did last week. Again, statues that you wish they had survived, but just like the 39 New York Fair, the 39 San Francisco Fair did almost all their works in plaster, and they didn't survive. A few of them, they on this particular one, the artist's maquette, which is about 1/8 the size of this, did survive and was put in somebody's yard in the San Francisco area. But the main one itself did not. So let's zip around here. I got a couple from New York City, so we got anybody from here. If you ever get a chance to go to New York City, you might want to visit the Radio City Music Hall. Everybody's lined up here for the Easter show one year. This was a faithful thing we did with my parents. Every single year, they would dress us up in our Easter finery, take us into New York and go see, we would generally go there twice a year. We'd see the Christmas show and we would see the Easter show. And if you ever get a chance to go there, it's an amazing theater. They give a tour, they take you down into the pit, show you how the turntables work and all the rest of it. But it's, you can see the lines. Back in the day when I was going there, it was open all year round and was showing movies all year round with these big stage shows before the movies. In recent years, they couldn't keep up with just running it as a movie theater, so it gets used more for concerts, stage shows, things like that. And then they still do the big, I know they do the Christmas show with the Rockettes. I don't know if they still do an Easter show or not, but it's really worthwhile seeing. And here we have somebody aboard the USS Constitution. They're off sailing. Again, I was just randomly, somebody on, what I tend to do is somebody on Facebook will post something like, does anybody have a picture of the USS Constitution? Oh yeah, in my dim memory, I remember I had one. I'll go restore it and post it. And then somebody else come by, oh, do you have a picture of the Britannis? Oh yeah, I'll go drag them out.
Bill?
Yeah.
Quick question. That was the sister ship to the United States, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And that would be US Constitution versus USS is usually Navy ships, isn't it?
Yeah, the SS, you're right. Yes. Yeah.
Or SS.
Yeah, SS. Yeah. So here, and this is where they would have sailed at the United States line. So
Right.
yeah, SS United States, SS America, that steamship as opposed to USS, right? So this was one I did about 2 weeks ago, and again, some film holds up really well. Some film you wonder if it was just shot badly. This was very, very, very cyan colored, very deep bluish looking thing. It was also at a hell of an angle, so I had to go and try to get the colors back, brighten it up, and then get it. So there's still a little bit of a tilt there to the Empire State Building, because the way that it was shot, if I straighten that out too much, the piers, then it looks like the water was going to run off the side. But again, I find this, to me, my way of relaxation, dealing with this and trying to figure it out, and you take your mind off of politics and all the rest of it. Another picture picked up totally by random, getting pictures again for the 1939 World's Fair. There was about 20 or so pictures somebody decided to take of the New York subway and L system. So they've got all these great shots of stations, some of the signage. If we zoom in here, we can come up and you can see their advertising. Packard cars over to the right. You can on some of the shots you can go in and start seeing signs for coffee and all the rest of it. But just the antique cars. If you go to the scene today, the elevated trains are totally gone, but this train station is still there. So I had fun. Again, I don't do all the work myself. I'll put it on a Vintage New York group and say, hey, can anybody match this up? And people come back and totally match it up with the Google Earth views, or sometimes people actually go out there and with the camera and try to line it up as quick as they can, or accurately as they can. So
the guy with the hat,
yeah,
he's doffing his hat to the other fellow.
I think he's keeping it from blowing away.
Oh, really? I thought he was, who wears a hat, but it looks to me like he's,
Could be. He could be saying,
I mean, that's a lost art. How many of you guys wear hats?
Well, I wear a baseball cap when I'm on patrol.
Well, yeah, but nobody wears hats like that.
No, nobody wears hats. No.
Anyway, it's just.
And like I said, I get a kick out of it. Again, time waste. See Liggett's over there. And, oh God, I have dim memories of that store. So it's, again, I just have fun going back and looking at these things over here. Western Union. None of those telegraph offices around anymore. So let's, since we have a bunch of people like the World's Fair, let's go there. And again, just whatever reason I did whatever one on any particular day, but Africa Pavilion, the Austria Pavilion, and the fountains just going in the front there. Belgian Pavilion, the Belgian Village was opened very, very late in '64 and remained open in '65. But in this particular one, somebody was very enamored by their meal. And they had written on the slide something like a really great sandwich. So I saw that written there and I had to go figure out what was a really great sandwich. And, they're getting their meal.
Right, you don't have a waffle.
Yeah, well, you can't eat, waffles all the time, right? So, and Chrysler in the foreground, and Port Authority the building's still there today as a catering hall in Queens. Oops, that one got copied in the wrong file area. So hang on, it's gone. So the Florida Pavilion, they had free samples of orange juice, and in '64. They had a porpoise show, big thing on tourism in Florida, and then in '65 they had the water ski show. But I remember my mother she had gone to the '39 World's Fair, and they had palm trees at the '39 World's Fair, and it was a huge thing. There was newspaper articles about how exciting it was to see a palm tree at the World's Fair. So I went out here to the World's Fair. It was the first palm tree I had ever seen, and my mother was very nonchalant, but been there, done that, seen it before. Well, it turned out they had gone to Miami for their honeymoon. So, but I remember as a kid just thinking a palm tree was the craziest thing I'd ever seen, and that wasn't until I saw a Joshua tree when I moved to LA. If anybody knows what a Joshua tree is, you will never ever bask in the shade of a Joshua tree. Riding in the AMF monorail down below the Hawaiian Pavilion. Nice view of one of the Luminaire street lights out here. Shot that I did, again, I belong to way too many Facebook groups, but one I belong to is Project Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo days of the space program. So I went and restored this one. You can see it still had some mold detail that I finally decided not to try to take out the rest of it because it was too much in the wording here. But you
Yeah,
can,
I'm sorry.
yeah, sorry, Don, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that's the Mariner program was the one my dad worked on.
Oh, is it? Really?
Yeah.
Great. Well, again, this is the thing that's amazing with a 35mm slide, you know, amazing detail that you can pick up on some of these pictures if it's taken with a good camera. So again, I'll post a picture on this in one of these Facebook groups, and people like, you know, your dad will say, oh yeah, I worked in that. And I remember when we had the problem with the high gain directional antenna, we had to go and change this and did that, you know. So it's really, to me, fascinating how, you know, an esoteric picture like this can generate all sorts of you know, stuff. And I'm just trying to see here. One sec. Did I hit the record button today? I don't remember if I did or not.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, it's recording.
I thought I did. I don't see the little icon blinking. So okay. Inside, thank you. The Mormon Pavilion. This the statue of Christus. It was a permanent sculpture, not plaster of Paris. And if you visited the Mormon Church in Westwood out here in LA, it's on display there today. So we have a little bit of the World's Fair close to us out here. This is another one I just did this past week. In the foreground is the Pan American International Highway. This was supposed to be somebody else's big pavilion. I think it might have been USSR, one of the others that decided they weren't going to build it. So you have this tremendous amount of land. Well, let's just pave a wandering path through it and have it as a salute to the Pan American Highway. Very, very dull area. In '65, it came back as the Avis go-kart track. In the back, of course, we have the Tower of the Four Winds and Small World behind it. For folks that may have missed it, Alice Davis, who was so instrumental in developing Small World, just died 2 days ago. And she had done the costumes for the Small World dolls. A lovely lady, sadly just left us.
Didn't that sculpture that was in the foreground, this one, wasn't that the one that Walt, the Disney company, made?
That's Raleigh Crump's work. Yeah.
Yeah, and then at the end, instead of moving it somewhere else, they threw it in the ocean.
Well, there's all sorts of talk about that. That basically Raleigh designed a very thin, light, airy structure, and he hated what they actually built because he neglected to think that they had to build it strong enough to survive a possible hurricane between the two seasons of the fair. So he really, and I thought the sculpture was great. I really enjoyed it, but he, being the artist, hated the rendition of it. So they got to the end of the fair, and he did not want to bring it back to California. He never wanted to see it again. And a bunch of the other Disney executives didn't want to bring it back because it was going to be very expensive, and it didn't fit in with the theming that they had in mind for Small World in California. So Raleigh got the job of telling Walt we don't want to bring it back, and Walt was fine with it because the cost of bringing it back was high. So then the age-old question comes up: what actually happened to it? And Raleigh said, "Oh, they cut it up and threw it in Flushing Meadows Bay." And somebody else that worked on the demolition told me, no, it was sold for scrap metal. I tend to lean towards the end because it would cost you money to cut it up. It would cost you money to put it on a truck. It would cost you money to go and throw it in the bay. And if somebody decided to give you $50 for it, why wouldn't you just tell them to take it away and they could do whatever they want for scrap? There were all sorts of other sculptures at the fair, including like the sculpture that hung up in front of the Tower of Light that was, again, sold for scrap. You know, scrap metal has money, and this was made out of high quality metal. So unfortunately, what happened though with Disney, and we found this out when I was, you know, working, you know, in the archives, is that you had Disney Studios finance the World's Fair. You had WED designed and Mapo built it. And then you had Disneyland operate it. And every one of the divisions assumed everybody else was keeping all the set of the records. So, you know, over the years, what am I going to do with this? Oh, somebody else has a copy of it, and they tossed it out. So the company has very, very small files on the the fair itself. The biggest thing they had, not surprising, was the legal files, the negotiating the contract with Ford or, Pepsi, that sort of thing. But that's why when they did the movie Tomorrowland, I became the source of all the World's Fair stuff for the film crew, because Disney just didn't have it. So the tower is gone, and where it went, maybe someday will show up, some record.
Yeah, Bill, did you ever see any of Rolly's actual artwork of the design of the tower?
Yeah.
It was very thin, and it could not have been built the way he designed it. I mean, it was beautiful, but it would not have survived any kind of heavy storm situation at all. The large arches there, I mean, those big pipe structures were very thin and lightweight in his artwork.
Yeah, it's very lacy was the way the word I always remember thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hurricane wasn't one of the 4 winds you had in mind?
Let's see, there was hurricane, cyclone, tornado.
Tornadoes. Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
I joined late, unfortunately. I had a huge plumbing deal here. They're ripping up my hardwood floor as we speak.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, what was I going to say? I forgot. You and I had this discussion years ago over the internet. I had a book, one of the little Disney souvenir booklets one time, right around the time that they were doing, the new Tomorrowland and bringing, the World's Fair attractions to Disneyland. There was a picture, and I know my sister has this stored somewhere at her house, that showed them putting the Tower of the Four Winds adjacent to Small World at Disneyland, kind of where there was a big hat shop there for a while. If you're facing the building, the Small World building was off to the left. I think it might be where Toontown ended up at some point. I know I saw it, and you said you had never seen anything like that. And I would have to lean towards what you're saying, because you've got a lot of experience and archives and stuff to look at. But I know I saw it.
Well, I think what you saw was an artist rendition of what.
Oh yeah, it was an artist rendition for sure.
Yeah. It's, again, they were planning on bringing it back, and then they found out how much it was going to cost to do it.
Okay.
Like I said, Rolly was looking for any excuse to destroy it because he hated it. And then the bean counter said it was whatever amount of money to bring it back. And we remember they had everything else was brought back, other people had paid for, so, like the Small World, the boats and everything, all paid for by Pepsi. They took it back. But Walt couldn't find anybody that was going to pay him to bring this back, and he didn't want it back. And Rolly, he went around the room. He very proudly talked about how he lobbied for the destruction of it. He did not want to see it again. It was too bad, they've done a very 3D recreation of it. If you have the Oculus Rift 3D glasses, a fellow took my pictures and modeled it in 3D, and you can walk up to it, under it, look up, and you can see all the whirligigs spinning around. One of the things they did do, and the way I know they did cut it up, was that all these various little pieces here, they took some of them and gave them to Disney executives who had worked on the project, particularly the fellows from Disneyland that came in and ran it. And a friend of mine has one of them. It's on a really nice wood plaque, and he's got basically a fish. One of these, you can see a fish right up here, and it's on a plaque, and it's to Bill Sullivan, I think was the fellow's name. Thanks for your time at the World's Fair. So little bits and pieces of it do exist. I know my friend has one, and somebody else has told me they have another, but I've never seen the other. But they did cut it up and do something with it, so little bits and pieces of it survived. This is real early on, building the transportation area. We're looking at the beginning of the Ford Pavilion at the 64 Fair. Over on the left here, it's called the Budd structure, B-U-D-D. Budd was a company that built a lot of train cars and sleeper cars and things like that for the railroads in the 30s. And they had built these Budd structures, and they had a giant wind vane that was still in existence at this point in time. And they had left them in the fair site between the 39 and the 64 fairs. basically just for picnic shelters. So you could come out, have a picnic here under the Budge shelter. The wind vane was still up there. And one of these things you go and you say, what the hell were they thinking? They decided to take it all out and they sold it off again for scrap. Got rid of the bud structures and the wind vane. The wind vane was so cool looking, and it lasted the 25 years between the fair, and they just cut it up and threw it away. They got pennies on the dollar for it. To think that they could have saved it was just such a neat Art Deco looking wind vane. And just random shots, the UniSphere. Everybody going into the Vatican Pavilion. With us being Catholic, it was almost obligatory. If I went with my mom, we had to go see the Pieta. I've mentioned before how my dad was part of the crew of bringing it over. So he didn't have as much interest in seeing because to him it was heartache and, hard work. But we kid online about the ever-present nuns. Back in 64 and 67, seemed like every shot of a World's Fair, you had nuns going at it. I always try to think, every time I think I have a bad job, I can think that I never had to dress up as a Swiss guard and sell brochures to people going to a pavilion. So I always think it's about the worst costume next to the girls that work in the hot dog and a stick booths and malls. Another recent restoration coming into the World's Fair, off to the very left where the lady standing here is the entrance to the Long Island Railroad exhibit, or not exhibit, station. And that's how I would come in by train an awful lot. Shea Stadium being real new in the background, and then everybody's walking in. All these flags here are just colorful motifs. They're not the flags of any particular nation or anything. They did that in quite a few spots in the fair because they didn't want to get into arguments about whose flag went in what order or how they did it. So they just put all these colorful banners up to get you into the fair. More as the UniSphere, the Swiss Skyway in the background.
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
If the Beatles did their concert in August of '65,
Yeah.
was that considered a separate event, or did the fair lose attendance because of that?
I really don't know. I imagine that particular day, a lot of people probably came to the fair and then went to the concert, as long as they're anyway. And if you went, it was a one-day thing. So if they did have a drop in attendance that day, I'm sure it didn't hurt them too much. But
Yeah.
I would think that people knowing that it was going to be a mess out at Shea Stadium because of the Beatles might have avoided the fair.
Yeah, could be.
Like when they had the Olympics here, everybody, they warned us, don't go anywhere. And
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
It was a wonderful time and nobody was here. The room was empty.
I think I told you before, went to Disneyland, and the only time I've ever been at any amusement park, we were on Space Mountain. There was nobody in line. When we got back to the station, said, "You want to go again?" And we did.
That's neat.
Get out of the train.
And here we have Westinghouse over here. We saw the time capsule before. It's over here, but if we go in and look, there's Colonel Morley's Louisiana Cafe. And again, being big to go and look on the internet, Colonel Morley had a bunch of restaurants and thought he could go and go toe-to-toe with Colonel Sanders. And turned out Colonel Sanders won the chicken war. But this turned out to be a pretty popular restaurant based on the news reviews that people were commenting. And I found online, the price of a chicken dinner, $1.19 or something like that. So, by the way, he had nothing whatsoever to do with Louisiana. But since you had Kentucky Fried Chicken, he went to go for something there. So Colonel Morley was from someplace totally different, but he just threw Louisiana on there. Hang on, he's fixing with his contractors, I think. The Pavilion of Gas. Every time you post a picture of the Pavilion of Gas, somebody on the internet always thinks they're the first one to find that funny and make a crude comment. Looking down from the AMF monorail, down below the glider ride, the Greyhound tram there, But I just again get a kick out of all the colors and like the luminaire down below. It's just so colorful. Again, sad that so many of these things didn't survive. The trams were used in places like the Erie, Pennsylvania, Erie, New York, or the fairgrounds out near Buffalo, rather, for years. But I don't think any of them are still running. And different ones of different odds and ends. Well, there was just a healthy discussion going on about Paul Bunyan when I posted this one about muffler men. And
It's definitely.
it's interesting. I had helped with a book. It was called I think it was called Right Thumb Up, Left Thumb Down. And the guy went around and did a whole book on these giant muffler men. If you remember, the guy would be standing outside a muffler shop holding a muffler. Well, here they put an axe in his hand. And this Paul Bunyan now lives in Lake George, New York. You can still go up and visit him. But all these people are going on about muffler men and where they are and how they were made, and different ones. So it's funny how a picture can strike all sorts of different comments. That's some happy scenery. Looking down from the New York State Pavilion over at the the transportation area. We have the Travel and Transportation Pavilion, the Cinerama Dome here. Again, you can date pictures by the colors of things like the Chrysler Pavilion was white in '64. This orangey, paint scheme for '65. But I could also date it by here. By going and looking, they stuck a Polaris missile outside. And this is where you try to figure out your life and how things go. In 1965, I was a kid looking at the Polaris missile. In 1973, I was designing the successor to it. So spent a whole bunch of time playing on the submarines, and you just don't look at it think you're going to have anything to do with it at that point. But other things you can look at, again, waffles. Everybody had to have waffles. If you didn't have a restaurant, you put up a waffle tent and you got waffles. I think this will zoom in a little bit more. And again, all sorts of things here, souvenirs. They had over here a whole bunch of vending machines that you could go and get your meals at and come and sit on the table here. So again, you could get sandwich, ice cream, or anything out of all the vending machines over here. More people going into the Vatican. Again, you can date it if you peek through the background. Belgian Village is being built, so we're still in '64. This was interesting. They had some fellows come from Alaska, and they built these totem poles, and he's carving here. They also had a fake igloo with stuffed sled dogs in it. But you can watch during the fair as they made these, erected them, and they have taken them back to Alaska, and they are in a totem pole museum that if you go to Alaska today, these totem poles still exist and they're viewable. Looking down from the New York State Pavilion, this is in '65, getting near the end of the fair. And one of the things I really liked about the fair was, even though they had a lot of financial woes and they were losing money and everything, they still did all these flowers all throughout the shots of the fair. They kept changing the flowers, putting in the seasonal flowers. And so we're getting into fall, we're getting fall colors and everything. But it would have been easy just to leave it as dirt or throw some sod in there or whatever. But right up to the very, very end, they kept the grounds looking pretty good, considering the financial woes that they were dealing with. And Coca-Cola's World of Refreshment. The Carillon is in Georgia now. Oh, when my mother, bless her soul, she collected Hummels. So this was like a pilgrimage to the Hummel shop. Over the years, I don't know how, I think she probably knew, but she never went on, that my brothers and I would play like baseball in the living room, and we would take out one of our Hummels. And I got pretty good at gluing Hummels back together again. And I was told after a while I should not be playing baseball anymore in the living room if I wanted to still live there anymore. But the Hummel shop was a real special thing for her. And she was a saint for never actually evicting me. '65, Minnesota had a kind of lackluster pavilion in the 64 season. So they went back and put a bunch of money into it for 65. And they came up with the big thing was the Vikings, were they in Minnesota, and they brought in this thing, the runestone, but they had a big Oli, the Viking, that they brought to the World's Fair. They came here with a Viking longship that they did a real good publicity campaign coming from Minnesota all the way by road down to the World's Fair and giving talks about it. And Big Oli is still in Minnesota today, and he got hit by a truck, but he's been restored. Going out to the Hawaii Pavilion. This was supposed to have been an art exhibit in the 64. Well, actually, it first started as the Argentina Pavilion for 64. That fell through. It became a very short-lived art pavilion, which was going to have a giant doll show in it, and then it had some art in it. That fell through. So in 1965, it became the Canadian Beer Parlor. And again, just the little things you get a kick out of. I don't know if these guys are having a meeting or whatever, but they're all dressed in suits and got their briefcase and are at the World's Fair. So maybe he's picking up the day's receipts or something. But this is opening day of the 65 season. There are a bunch of dignitaries coming in and doing things. So cars and everything scattered around. Empty roads we don't see today. Alaska Pavilion, sometimes I can only restore them so much and you have to just say enough's enough. And this was a print. Again, it's gotten waterlogged in somebody's photo album. So I left some of this here. I just didn't want to spend the time to take it all out. But I was basically working to get a picture of this bear somebody had remembered and wanted to know if I had a picture of the bear, thinking that their father may have bought it after the fair, and it turned out that his stuffed bear was a different looking stuffed bear than this stuffed bear. So, but kind of interesting the thought that his father had a stuffed bear like this in his den all these years. Well, here's one for Joey. This is the U.S. Pavilion being torn down after it had been left to rot for years and became an urban haunt for local kids, and then caught fire and burned it down. The thing I get a real poignant thing was these planters up here, and these trees had been living on their own since 64, just sitting there on whatever rainwater kept them alive all these years. And right to the very, very end of the destruction of the pavilion, they were hanging in there.
They were tough trees, Bill. They were New York City trees. They could survive on cigarette butts and urine and all sorts of nasty stuff.
Yeah, I understand that right after this picture was taken, one of the trees mugged the photographer.
Like I said, they were tough trees.
I look at this and it's really, I was just kind of hoping that somebody took one home or did something. It'd be nice to think that this poor thing survived and is still in somebody's backyard in Queens somewhere. It's just sad. Looking down from the skyway at the Indonesian Pavilion, this area was later flooded along here. So this particular day looked like they were doing some work on it. Again, over 65 view. You can see in the background, there's sort of New York City. Back then, they were just getting out of the concept that every apartment building needed its own incinerator to burn its own trash. And the air in New York was pretty bad. I mean, LA had the reputation of smog. Well, New York air back then was pretty nasty, which is why the brass rail restaurants all got so gray and gloomy looking. Up atop the skyway, just looking across the fairgrounds. Well, this was one I did about a month ago. This was behind the Illinois Pavilion. Again, this was an incredibly dark, nasty picture, and I had scanned it about 15 years ago. And one day I was in a mood to do something with it, so I was able to go and bring it back. But again, so many things, just the little details. If you look in it, winter wheat, the third largest producer, offers high quality and convenient markets, or convenient, I think this is markets. Just you can see how much grain there was in the film and everything, but with the Photoshop and the various tools, these things really come back. So what's interesting is, just zoom back a bit. posted this online in a World's Fair group, and everybody started going about, oh, look at the back door there. I mean, is that a fire door, an emergency door, or whatever? It's just interesting how something like that can generate so much interest by people that, so I thought I knew everything about the fair, but I never knew the backside of the Illinois Pavilion. It's about as exciting as Disneyland's backside of water. Just did this one this week after the 64 season ended. They took the Sinclair dinosaurs and took them on a tour of the United States. They ran for about 4 years, I think. They had them on flatbed trucks, and they took them out to various shopping centers and malls. And they had the Mold-A-Rama machines that you could go and make your own dinosaurs. And after this thing ran, again, about 4 years or so, then they split up the collection, and the different dinosaurs went to different museums, and 2 of them are out in Texas at a state park, that sort of thing. But post this online. This one doesn't really give much clues, but others, you'll see a sign of a department store or a gas station or anything. Oh, that's my town, and I was there, and that mall's been gone or whatever. But this was a big thing for people that had not made it to the fair to see real life-size dinosaurs come to your town. Again, more just colorful flags of no particular nations.
Hey, Bill, when you posted the dinosaur earlier this week, I had to take a double take because I thought, where was the guy's head? But then I realized it was like sort of in a different perspective and had to look closely to see it.
Oh, okay.
But it was kind of funny. I thought, where's the guy's head?
That's the dinosaur got him. Jurassic Park, right? So again, the ever-present nuts.
I'm talking about the dinosaur's head.
No, I'm saying the dinosaur ate him like they do in Jurassic.
No, the dinosaur ate, yeah.
So knowing how windy it can get in in the Flushing Meadow, I was looking at this, and all I could think of was Sally Fields and the Flying Nun.
It's probably where they got the concept for the show.
Yeah. This is one, again, I did about 2 weeks ago, posted, and anybody know where, I know where it is. Does anybody want to guess what we're looking at?
After the United States.
This was the mobile pavilion, and they had a thing for the drive across the United States being the thriftiest driver. So it would light up your map. You could see the route going along where they're going, and they would basically, show you the econo drive, where if you were a good driver. They had about 12 fake little cars sitting there, and they played a movie if you driving along, and if you sped up, you used too much gas, and if you went too slow, you lost the race. So they would trace the path of the people on their race on this map. Again, interior shots, you get it and you go, wow, I've seen this in black and white before in publicity pictures, but I've never seen it in color. You can tell this is 64 because the brass rail is sparkling white and shiny. We're up on the roof of the Kodak Pavilion. And now we're up on the tower, the New York State Pavilion. You can see she's hanging onto her hat. I only went up there a few times because it cost money and I didn't have money, but it was always windy up there. You can see how low the railing was, compared to, people. Today, of course, they'd have to have a barrier up, twice their height or something. But I can remember going up there on a windy day and looking over the edge of it and saying, I think I'll get away from the edge. Just did this one about a week ago. Again, you scan these, you put them aside, and then for whatever reason, you go back. And I mentioned this was a view I saw very, very often. And this is the line for General Motors Futurama 2. This set of shades up here was added about June of '64, when they realized that the line was much longer than they ever dared hope for, and that it was going to be very hot during the summer. So they built this covered area out there. And then people like, why on earth would you take a picture of this? Film was expensive, and you had 12, maybe 20 exposures on a roll, and you had to, carry the film and, get it developed and everything. But to me, this is why I just love these random shots. Somebody, you don't know if he was just, putting the film in the camera and getting the first shot ready or whatever, or if this was one of those things. So when you're showing it to your friends, God, all I did was stand in the lines like this the entire 2 days I was there. It wasn't worth it, or whatever. But I just loved it. The feather, the hat with the big pink feather on it, the people just talking, it really brought back a tremendous amount of memories for me of the actual experiences of being at the fair. This was the amphitheater. It was basically a big stage show. This thing would open up here, a rocket would take up and fly off here. But if the major thing we're looking at is the man in the Bell jetpack, excuse me, he would fly across the theater. It was incredibly loud. I've got pictures of the thing with everyone with their fingers in their ears and everything. And if you look down at the people on the stage, you can see over here, the musicians have their hands protecting their ears. So it was really, I mean, it was a big thing. We were all going to have jetpacks. We were going to fly to high school and do everything over here. Again, they were all putting their hands up. But he flew across the stage and, he went up, flew around the theater, came back and landed back down. It was up for about 25, 30 seconds or so. It was fascinating to watch, but
Disney had one of those guys about that
Mhm.
time at Disneyland.
hey, the same guy, he actually came out.
Really?
Yeah. He,
Did Disney have him come to the fair?
yeah, he came out to Disneyland for the Tencennial exhibit. Matter of fact, that's where it's really funny how things go in full circle. The guy in the jetpack flying around Disneyland was really what gave me the idea to do my book on Disney TV, because I had left Disney. I was at Warner Brothers, and I used to write up notes for screenings and all these little anecdotes. And Disney called me and said, "Do you remember what show it was? We had somebody fly the jetpack around, Sleeping Beauty Castle." And I said, "Oh yeah, that was the Tencennial anniversary." And I started thinking, well, maybe people would be interested in this stuff. So that's what got me going on the book. But yeah, this was Colonel Ked. He was sponsored by Ked's Shoes. It was built by Bell Aerospace. Again, very, very loud. I think he used hydrogen peroxide and some other things as a fuel.
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used hydrogen peroxide, and they were the only people who found a way to make storage tanks that were smooth enough that it wouldn't decompose the hydrogen peroxide before they actually used it.
Mm. Yeah, I know that it's a real engineering thing. They also used it, by the way, in Lost in Space. Professor Robinson flies around the planet they're wrecked on and does a reconnaissance mission. So, yep, the Bell jetpack.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
I was at the 1984 closing ceremonies of the Olympics at the Coliseum in LA, and they had that thing there.
I think it was a slightly newer one. I think the same concept, but because this one they used all sorts of things. It was in the James Bond, it was in Thunderball, that sort of thing. And I think they did redo it for the Olympics. Was it as noisy in person at the Olympics?
It was so loud. We were all the way at the other end of the Coliseum, which would be well over 100 yards. And that thing took off and landed at the peristyle end, and everybody in the whole place had their fingers in their ears. It was incredibly loud.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, how long could he stay up for?
About 45 seconds was my understanding.
Really?
Yeah. And I imagine at 40 seconds you were looking for a landing pad. Yeah, I imagine he also probably got pretty good at counting the seconds or whatever. Albert Fisher has some really neat shots of him flying around the Unisphere before opening day when they were doing a special, and he talked again about how loud it was. And he also talked about how they were very careful in predicting exactly where they were going to fly. And the guy was, checking out the winds and making sure he was going to fly into the wind or downwind or whatever. That all made a huge difference for him. But Albert has some, and I've restored him. I've got Albert's pictures here somewhere of them, going out and flying the thing. So, yep, Colonel Ked. But here's one for you, Wayne. I always thought RCA had one of the best locations at the fair. There's the main entrance, the Gotham Gate in the background. And then coming down into the fairground, you got Gotham Plaza and then the RCA Pavilion. By the way, if anybody wants a World's Fair collectible, there's a fellow that's selling a sign for the Rodham Gate. I think he's asking $499. It's on eBay right now. He hasn't sold it the last couple of weeks he's tried. If there was a sign, if anybody had the Gotham Gate sign, I would probably be buying that and putting it on my wall. Because the Gotham Gate was the one I came in probably 80% of the time. But if you want the Rodham Gate sign, go look on eBay. It's up there. But this was a big thing. Come and see yourself on color TV. That was so new. Just did this one about a week ago, and people were really enjoying it. Very, very early days of the fair. We're looking out from the China Pavilion. It's so new, you can still see they have sawhorses out here, blocking the entrance because the work was still being done. This was super overexposed, and I was pretty happy to get it. I've thought about trying to straighten it out a little bit more and lean it out, but it was at a hell of an angle, and I try to balance it out basically for the gate here. If you zoom in on it, you can see the lights up here for the lighting up the HemisFair, and I mentioned those lights were then used to light up the stage at Woodstock. So didn't know when I was at Woodstock that it was near a World's Fair souvenir. This was the pavilion in 1964. You wonder, was it the pavilion, or was it the pavilion? No, it was the pavilion. They couldn't come up with a name for it. It's general purpose thing here. Here they're having a large church ceremony here. They also used it for the TV show Queen for a Day, that sort of thing. They did Olympic trials in here, weightlifting trials. They did other wrestling demonstrations. In '65, it came back as the Winston Churchill Pavilion and is now the aviary at the Queen's Zoo out there. So it still exists.
Bill, my favorite oddball use was for a national accordion convention.
No kidding.
But then Mr. Rogers is a guest speaker.
Wow, that would have been different. Again, just random views, sculpture outside the Greece Pavilion. We at the Coke Pavilion, people thought that they gave out free soda. No, they didn't. It was 10 cents. I just got a kick out of this because brands don't exist anymore. And I don't recall what they covered over here. I do have a picture of it with the thing here, but it was something that I guess didn't sell real well. So they cleverly covered it up. But you could come out here and get yourself a soda. These cups, somebody must have ended up with a giant pile of these gold Coke cups because they show up on eBay 4 or 5 times a year. I have one of them that kind of crushed. I keep thinking about getting a better one. Then I see what the guy's asking price-wise, and I go, nah, don't need it. But no free Coke. I did get a kick out of this. No tipping.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I didn't think that if somebody sold me a Coke for 10 cents, I'd have to give her a tip, but someone.
I like the slogan, good with food.
Yeah. Again, just random shots. It's nighttime. Somebody's walking back out to the gate. The pavilions have all closed at 10 o'clock. You've got 1 or 2 extra shots on the end of your roll of film, and you're determined to get things at the very end. And I'm glad they did, just random shots of things. Over to the New York State Pavilion, the giant Texaco map. I kind of felt sorry for whoever this guy is up on the stage because there doesn't appear to be anybody that's looking in his direction. Usually you see the chair.
People in the front. There's a couple of people in the front looking at him, looks like.
Kind of walking by him. I mean, he's out there he's doing something, but everybody's looking at the square dancers out there. And I figured that's what he's doing is calling the square dancers, and he's part of the show. But when I first scanned it, again, I'm taking out all the scratches and dirt and everything. I look at it and the guy's all by himself. And then I realize, he's the caller. So, but and then the guard here making sure nobody gets near the square dancers. Missouri snack bar. I enjoyed eating at Missouri. It was kind of off the beaten path. The food was pretty good and it was cheap. So compared to some of the places that had a long line, they had a restaurant inside and then some snack bar, soda machines and everything outside. But I always thought Missouri snack patio was one of my hidden secrets of the fair. It was, you know, it was in plain sight, but people just didn't go there for some reason. This is another one I did about 2 weeks ago. Woman's here eating, and I was trying to figure out exactly where she was. And I zoomed in on the menu here, and I said it looked like it says HERMIS restaurant. Yep, that was the name of it. It's the Hermes restaurant in the Greek Pavilion. So she's eating a meal here, and you know we just got a nice picture of the patio outside and all.
The look on her face is like she's not sure about what she just tasted.
Yeah. Yeah. Could be squirrel. No. In 1964, this was the Macy house out here where you could go and buy, go to Macy, buy an entire house with all of the fittings in it and down to your toothbrush that they put in the bathroom for you. It was called Allstate Properties. It didn't return in 64. In 65, it was a USO lounge. So it was a, matter of fact, I just want to make a note about something here. 1 second. It was a USO lounge operated by Coca-Cola in conjunction with Coca-Cola, that people could come in here and, you know, if you were a service member, come in and relax a bit. But in 64, you would have seen a car parked in the driveway of what looked like a typical house you could buy by catalog. Again, getting late in the year, but the flowers, these, of course, all about a week later, would be ripped out of the ground by all the housewives trying to take them home at the end of the fair. But I thought they did a really nice job in keeping it going to the end. The Tower of Light, kids with their map trying to figure out where to go next. You know, talking to people the other day about Disneyland with the everything being done on the app and having to schedule yourself and, you know, everything else. I would really just prefer these days wandering around carefree, and that looks cool. Let's go there, as opposed to have to schedule your entire day in advance. Going up for General Electric, let's go see the Carousel of Progress. Hong Kong, you walk in through the junk there, and there were snack bars, beer garden, and a place you could buy pearls. And the Avenue of Nations. And again, I just love what they did with the flowers throughout the year there. And he's a gardener tending the flowers. Again, I did this one for the value, super overexposed print. But being a geek, I came back and, you know, just looking at the details of the towers here, the lights. Put this one online and people were oohing and ahhing. Like I said, I belong to this, you know, a space group, and people were, you know, getting a kick out of this. This was outside the Missouri Pavilion. Back in 64, anything to do with the Mercury program was the thing. I mean, there was nothing cooler in 1964 than a Mercury space capsule. So they had this sample one there, and then they later had the real one over at the the space exhibit. And our friend, the Sinclair dinosaur, he would move his neck back and forth and hold sway over the parkway down below. They're just trying to get by, but there go a bunch of the nuns. This was an interesting one, like why were all the flags missing off the flagpoles that day? You know, again, might be some memo in some archive someplace, but for whatever reason, they didn't have any flags along the, I think this was the Court of States, and they were not there that day. I've talked a number of times about the towers. You can always see people up on the top tower, the second tower, and I've got, of all my pictures, I think 2, maybe 3 of people on this tower. This, of course, was the one they put all the vending machines on. So since you couldn't get to it, I would always wonder if you went up and bought a container of milk, how long that had been up there.
You couldn't get to that tower? Or was it-
The elevator didn't stop there. It did have a stop. It would come up and there's a cutout right here and you could stop and get off at that tower. Or you could come up on the elevator up here. Well, for whatever reason, the elevator just ran right up here and the elevator did not stop at this this tower. How your gas is delivered to your house. Again, more of the flowers here. Again, that's the gas pavilion on the left. We're the Denmark now with a playground. You could drop your kids off and pay an hourly fee to have them watched. They had a very nice restaurant at the Danish pavilion. You could eat there, or you could go anywhere else in the fair and pay money to leave the kids there. And they had a giant exhibit of Legos that the kids could play with. Again, another doll shop, souvenir stand inside one of the pavilions. 64, you can date by the glider ride. And again, the random stuff, why somebody took this particular picture inside the Swiss pavilion. Maybe he or she collected, sold, or just like watches. But this was one that was a real bear to restore from, you know, the way it was shot. And again, I just like finding these rare sort of esoteric views of things. This was a very large negative, gave a lot of detail. I have a whole bunch of them. They just take a long time to restore because I can't put them through my Nikon scanner, which takes out all the dirt and scratches. Not all the dirt, takes out most of the dirt and scratches automatically. These had to be done on a flatbed scanner, which takes out a little of the dust and dirt, but it really had to be done mostly by hand. But again, if you zoom in on these things, you can get a tremendous amount of detail. So you had to look up that there is a burglar is a guy that log rolls. So if that comes up in my New York Times crossword, I'm all set for it. On my website, I have a whole file of the people that did the log rolling and axe throwing at the Oregon Pavilion on how all the political intrigue of the guys that ran it in 64 battling for contracts with the guys that wanted to run it in 65 and how they sucked and I'm better and that sort of thing. What was interesting here was you can see a piece of ground in the background. Well, that was a very nice empty piece of land that everybody would go and just watch the show for free and not pay the 50 cents to see the thing. So the guys in Oregon had to real quick come up with these floats and put these you know, cloth pieces across so that they had a chance of people coming and watching what they were doing. This is from a Kodak reel. They had a set of 80 slides that they sent out to dealers, and you would see a picture of the World's Fair and then a picture of a Kodak product, and it just ran on autoplay on a carousel projector in the dealer. So in this particular one, they happen to be in the Kodak pavilion holding a very nice Instamatic camera, excuse me, much better than my Instamatic, and they're just having a great, excuse me, great time of enjoying the fair. Just grab the water here. So kind of an interesting artifact souvenir. Sorry, I get all choked up when I see Instamatic cameras. This was again the sort of thing you'd see that picture and then you'd see this one. So I had fun with this one. I restored it, stuck it on some of the movie groups that, you know, for movie restoration or that sort of thing, and asking people how many of you had this particular camera, and you know, people were saying it was about here it says less than $20. Somebody was saying he got robbed, he paid $29 for his, but they had this dial in the front of it that you could change your settings here for, you know, if you were on sand, snow, bright light, color, you know, to try to do some color balancing. So it was kind of neat, neat little technique they brought in. And what a lot of people didn't remember is that this crank here is because you wound these things up and they would have a spring motor inside that would, you know, run the film. And, you know, that's why sometimes trying to restore these gets to be a challenge, because they start off at the right speed and then they start slowing down and the spring's wearing out and you got to go. Luckily, you can kind of fix that. So anyway, that's the ones for the New York Fair. A couple more minutes here. Disneyland, everybody okay with Disneyland?
Either Disneyland, I'd like Knott's Berry Farm.
Okay, I don't have many for Knott's Berry Farm, so why don't we do Knott's and then we'll go to Disneyland. So some of
Oh,
these
this would be good.
might have shown these on some of the Knott's talks, but back when Knott's had a animal component to it, they had the seals out here, Old MacDonald's Farm. And Cody, you probably know some of these people, as I know you.
That's Red Feather.
Okay,
That's him again. He was there a long time.
he must be telling a heck of a good joke because the conductor's really enjoying it.
He had a great sense of humor, they said. I never met him, but
Oh, okay.
he was I mean, he was there until like the 1970s or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he shows up in a lot of the pictures. Now they would go aboard the train and rob it. Today, of course, if you came in with a gun, some vigilante would probably shoot back at you. You can't do that these days, but they would come through asking everybody, put your stuff in the bag. Another Native American out there.
Actually, I think it's him.
The train back before you had to put steel poles around it to keep everybody from touching it.
I remember the Candy Palace.
One of the shops. You know who this one was, Cody?
I'm not sure who the gentleman was. There was guys out there that their whole purpose was to drag around those donkeys
Yeah.
and look picturesque.
Yeah, he shows up in a bunch of them.
Some of those guys in the 1940s actually lived there. I mean, Walter Knotts let them live in the ghost town. I'm not quite sure how that happened or what they did, but or where they live, but that's what I understand.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Church.
That's gone.
Yeah. Please stay out of the circle and don't tease the monkey. And if you tease the monkey, I think you'll find out why you don't tease monkeys. So, but the organ grinder and his trained monkey. Again, some of these pictures are in terrible, terrible shape. I just did the best I could, but they're never going to be looking like a current digital shot. But let's rob the stagecoach. Statue of oh, that's the guy we saw before, and he stayed too long, and they just plastered him over. So
that's by a guy by the name of Bell. I was on Facebook with his daughter for a while. She'd talk about it. I don't know who he is. There's a lot of guys like that out there.
Guy looks like he could be Gabby Hayes' brother, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The train again, the Calico Mine train in the background. So that's all the ones I had done this year of Knott's. Again, I have tons and tons of Knott's pictures, but these are just ones that I did this year for any particular reason. So let's zip over to Disneyland. We'll see very early Autopia, no guardrail in the middle and next to no vegetation. And then just got a kick out of it here. The guy's wearing a little headband here. I think he had picked up at the Indian Village. In the background, the pony farm and the support structures here. You can see a train crossing gate because the service vehicles would have to go in and out crossing the railroad. Background, the fabled orange groves of Anaheim. This was, I think this was about 58, if I remember when this one was taken. But again, all this has changed and gone today. Up on the pirate ship. Going aboard the Jungle Cruise. And long changed the Disneyland Hotel back when it had the marina in there. This was another one that was really terribly shot that it had some terrible mold on it. So, like I could say, okay, this hotel room here was totally covered in mold, but this hotel room looked the same. So I would just move hotel rooms around and make the mold go away. So again, that's the fun stuff I enjoy doing with Photoshop. I'm going to go into the front gate. It's a little blurry, but you give a kick. I had some other shots where the prices are better, but you can see that price of adult was $6.70. So things have changed. They would sell souvenir title slides, so you could take your own pictures of Disneyland, and you could buy a pre-made title slide copyrighted by Walt Disney Productions. Good one for Victoria's Island. If you don't like creepy old scary places, don't worry. Huck Finn and myself was plenty scared too. Huck was more scared than me, was not. So
Back when they would let you catch fish off the dock there, which is
yeah,
an interesting problem, taking a fish home as a souvenir.
yeah. The people said they ended up in the trash cans quite a bit.
Yeah.
Down Main Street again. This one incredibly dark. Sometimes, you know, I just do it as a personal challenge. And you can always tell pictures the 70s, the hairstyles and things change. Back when you could actually just walk up to a character and not have to schedule it on an app. The swans are gone now. They used to have a couple black swans and a couple white swans, but they said they took them out because of fallout from the fireworks. My guess is they probably just didn't want to pay to maintain.
They said people would throw them stuff to eat it and make them sick.
Yeah.
So that was another problem.
Just various views around the park. The Indian
They
dance.
still had that.
What's that?
I said, I wish they still had
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah. I tell you, I have a bunch of movies of this, and when you see all the kids out there dancing, you know, the guests here would all be invited to come out and dance at the end. They were just having one hell of a lot of fun. And really, we can put ourselves right back in the 70s with the Good Time Singers. You know, very mod outfit, and the swinging Disneyland of the 70s, the pop-up stage. Earlier shot on Main Street looking over at the Wurlitzer organ shop. Here's again, boy we saw before in the car. He's got his headband on.
Look at that kid.
Kid needs to learn not to look down the business end of the cannon.
Yeah, well, his brother's ready. Come on, go ahead, Harry. Go ahead.
His brother's ready to rip him apart.
Yeah, I dare you to.
Oh.
Everybody's a kid at heart, right? The Indian War canoes. Later, the Davy Crockett canoes.
They don't run those anymore, do they?
Yeah, they do.
They do?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think they brought him back. I think they had stopped for a number of years and then brought him back. A flower shop, long, long gone.
Oh,
America on Parade.
yeah, 1976.
Yeah.
I have the program from that, the souvenir program from that parade.
Oh, well, you don't see that anymore.
No, no. And again, things that have changed. The Ruggles China Shop, one of the early licensees. Timex clocks over there.
Cascade Peak.
There's a better view of the peak.
Mhm.
The flag ceremony. Mark Twain looking down at the
Oh,
Indian.
look at the Indian village. Wow.
Small world without the Tower of the Four Winds. Having blown his brother to pieces, he was waiting for his.
Yeah, I never see, I haven't been there in a couple of years, but I never see kids around those cannons anymore. Maybe they're all over in Star Wars land. I don't know, but.
Probably. This was the Tomorrowland I knew when I, sorry, the Fantasyland I knew when I first worked there. Welch's Grape Bar in the background. I loved going in there, getting a glass of grape juice, and then the Mickey Mouse Theater But I had the 3 cartoons that they showed there memorized, you know, I mean, they never changed them. Again, the Indian village. From the train, looking at the boat. Burning.
Oh, I remember getting on that when I was a kid. It made me sick to my stomach when I saw that.
Mhm.
You know, Disney always threw in a lot of reality.
The guy Dave Bossert that gave a talk on Disneyland in 3D is now doing a book on the House of Tomorrow. Really looking forward to seeing that come out.
Oh, yeah.
And looking out from Small World. They're doing work here, redoing the area here the train went through. They had first put it in, it was basically giant dirt ditches, and they decided they needed to spiff it up and put in the patchwork quilt and everything. But it's interesting that's, you know, today you don't see a lot of work going on in the park. Up here, scaffolds, a construction fence, you know, and guys actively working on it. The original Skyway buckets. And evidently this wagon has been taken out and restored and is now in a museum. But again, here's our brave Indians. I like the subs much better in this paint scheme.
Oh, yeah.
And this one, Walt Disney Legacy for the Future, that had been the Wurlitzer shop. And then this was a look that, you know, Walt has died and where's the company going, exhibits that we're working on. Hills Brothers Coffee Shop off to the side here. Very early shot of the Nature's Wonderland going in the background. You see the cranes going on in giant piles of dirt and everything. So this was basically when they were expanding it. They had first put in Nature's Wonderland, now they're putting in Rainbow Caverns and the additional stuff that they worked on. Well, of course, now it's all Big Thunder.
I like Big Thunder, but I'm not sure that was a fair trade.
No, I love Nature's Wonderland. I was so sorry to see it go. I rode the train, I think that about the second to last day, and it was really sad. And enjoying yourself on the teacups. Back when they put banners across Main Street welcoming you to there or proclaiming the latest additions into the park. Canal boat. Most dangerous one in the jungle, the mother-in-law. The grotto. And then sometimes people just caught the vegetation. You know, again, I don't know why I particularly picked this one to restore or whatever. It's probably just the next one I was doing that day. But, you know, you look at it and go, okay, yeah, I guess that was worth spending your money on. Going down Old Main Street over to the Disneyland Hotel. And again, a lot of people asked, you know, online, can you zoom in on it? And, you know, souvenirs, fashion shop, the magic shop, and, you know, you could get your buses here for the Gray Line tour and go and see the stars of Hollywood. I spent a lot of time when I was with Disney in these shops, helping on inventories and, you know, all sorts of other stuff. And so I enjoyed these, just brought back lots of memories. And this is one I just enjoyed too. You know, Grandpa's out there, the kids are enjoying Disneyland. He's probably watching, here's the kid with the feathers, so he's probably watching them getting ready to blow themselves to pieces, thinking about these dang kids, you know. But he's just very dapper in his hat and everything, just enjoying it. Tomorrowland, the way it should look.
Mm-hmm.
Fantasyland, the way it should look. Oh boy, Bill's on a rut here. He's thinking back when he worked there, nothing should have changed. Utopia, no rail. Well, this was an interesting one. Disneyland Hotel somebody asked me what they were doing, and I said, oh, they were testing all the little things that go in the middle of your pizza to keep the box from going.
That'd be a big pizza.
Yeah, but again, why somebody got this particular picture? They were getting ready for a event and putting other tables out, and again, part of this got hit by mold. So I just said, well, I'll take this non-moldy table and I'll put it in place of this moldy table. And sometimes it's tough because this table obviously is a little smaller than this table. So I'll take it, put it in another window, resize it, paste it back down. Absolutely stupid, total absolute waste of time, but I have fun with it. Over at the Disneyland Hotel, for whatever reason, for a period of time, they had one of the propellers from the Queen Mary. So they had, here's one of the ship's anchors and propeller, and now it's all been moved out of there. It's in a different part of LA, somebody mentioned. But why they had a propeller from the Queen Mary over there, I think Rather Corporation might have been running the Queen Mary for the city of Long Beach.
Disney ran the Queen Mary for a while. When I was working for the Disney stores, I could get on the Queen Mary for free.
Yeah, this is before Disney did it, but I think Rather was doing it, so I think he borrowed a propeller.
Yeah, it was Rather, because that's how Disney got into it when we took it over for a while there. But yeah, I think that's why, because they had it, they had one of these on display at the Queen Mary. You could see it actually on the shaft. I think they had one of those windows where you looked in.
Yeah.
And so they probably had the extra one and thought, oh, we can put it at the Disneyland Hotel.
Yeah. And again, just the Fantasyland that was there when I first started working. It's interesting. People ask every now and then, has anybody ever found themselves in your pictures? And I don't have the right one here, but I had a picture of Fantasyland. If you may remember, there was a set of restrooms off to the side here. And this is one guy had lost his family pictures. His dad had dropped the camera somewhere on the trip or something, and he said, do you happen to have any pictures on August of, make up a date, 68? And I found all these pictures of Fantasyland, and there was a picture of a man and woman and a girl standing outside a restroom. They said, oh my God, it's my mother, father, and sister waiting for me to come out of the men's room. So it's funny how you look at these and you just wonder who all these people are, and does anybody ever spot anybody in them? The original entrance to the original Tomorrowland. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. Rainbow Ridge. Oh, the Disneyland 25th anniversary. And it's funny, as soon as this slide pops up, the song instantly pops in my head, and there's these letters swung around, that sort of thing. But I was working there, I think basically 6 days a week at that time, so I had that parade burned into my my brain, and just again, fun memories. The canal boats. Again, I'm glad I never had to wear a costume like that for one of my jobs. And that's it for Disneyland. So let's see, we're running short on time. Let's see if there's anything else here real quick. Let's see. How about Freedomland? I think I did some, yeah, it's just a few from Freedomland for this year. So Engine Company 8, you would come and you could tour their firehouse. But then several times a day, they would burn down the city of Chicago, and they would take this wagon out here, and you'd pump it and put out the fire. And you can see that the rods here for pumping. You'd get a little certificate saying how you helped save Chicago. This was their version of the combination Jungle Cruise or the riverboat cruise, but you'd be on the boat and you were going through the their version of Rivers of America, and you'd find the same sort of thing you'd see at Disneyland, animals along the side, trappers, Indians, all that sort of thing. Here again, just a difference in exposure. Two different shots. It's not the same exact shot, but for whatever reason you change the exposure on it. And let's
I think that ended up at Cedar Park eventually, or Cedar Point.
Bunch of it did, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, real quick, I'll just do HemisFair. I'm toying with the idea of doing a HemisFair book, so I've been playing with some of those. But we're up at the top of the Tower of the Americas, which you can still go to today, looking down across the city, and down below part of the river that they extended to come out into the fairgrounds. GE had exhibit. As a matter of fact, a bunch of the companies that were at 64 World's Fair had exhibits, but they were really much smaller than anything you'd seen at the 64 World's Fair. So this is the GE Pavilion, no Carousel of Progress. Another view looking out from the Tower of Americas. General Motors. Some of these buildings are still there. Some of them are derelict. Others have been torn down. Others are trying to find a purpose for. If you go there, San Antonio has changed quite a bit over the years. This was a theater that had been very popular at Expo 67, the Kino Automat Theater, and basically you could come in here and you can see, be the director, push a button. So the movie would be going along and you would find at a certain point, does John go home or does John go to the movies? And you would, the audience would vote and John would go to the movies. The next time he might come back and vote and John would go home. And so they had about, I think there was something like 12 or 13 branch points in there. So if you take 13 times 13, whatever, the number of opportunities, you could come up with a real variable number of films, and it became very popular. You had water, these boats would give you a tour around, or you could get watch the water skiers going out there. They did have a nice international presence, unlike the 64 fair. It was a sanctioned World's Fair, so quite a few of the international exhibitors were there. Again, looking down from up above. Some of the buildings are still out there. The U.S. Pavilion, and over here has became a courthouse. A lot of the others totally gone. And again, this is the U.S. Pavilion. Look at the line of people waiting to get in there. And then down here is the Los Voladores, the aerial acrobats from Mexico that we saw swinging by their ankles at the 64 World's Fair. So quite a few people coming in to go see them. They're very popular. This one about a week ago, you could go to the Lone Star Beer Pavilion and get a history of Texas, and down below you could come and sit there, have a beer, and watch the water ski show. So I think I'll end there. Take up everybody's entire day. I didn't get to Expo 67 or some of the others. Let me stop share.
I'll give you something for next week.
Yeah, I was thinking I could save something. Let me just see what's here in chat. Going all the way back up. Okay, wait, what? Okay. Oh, the film was Windjammer. Okay, thanks, Derek. We're talking back about what was in the Grauman's Chinese Theater at that particular time. Okay, yeah, early color for 39, as Richard mentioned, ASA 10, then they came up to 25 was a mind breaker of the time, but it makes it really hard. I'm doing a bunch of slides right now from the 39 New York Fair where the guy took a lot of pictures at night. And in some cases, he was really good, used a tripod, others, and others, they kind of blurred. So I just bought a new package from a company that's supposed to be helping with motion sensitivity and stuff. I'm playing with that and so the first results were pretty good. But again, a tripod was definitely your friend back then. Okay, Kodachrome did not reach ASA 65 and ASA 25 till 61. Wow. Yeah, the 39 fair is the book of records placed in library so you could find it again. And how do you find it in 5,000 years? And the question is, 5,000 years, anybody going to find a library? So I think that was no Easter show anymore. That's too bad. Thanks for the update on that, Jim. And had Belgian waffles today. Did you make some for the rest of us? Oh, looks like she left, so we can't scold her. So next week, everybody tell Carolyn.
We just had a restaurant open here in Round Rock that specializes in Belgian waffles, so I'm going to be heading out there next few days.
Yeah, we have a waffle place here in Granada Hills, and we went to a couple of years ago, and it just their version of it was not anywhere near as good. Then I went back a little bit later, and the next time I think they got a little bit better. So, oh, poor Randy's got it. I need to shop for replacement flooring. It doesn't look like he's having a great day. And just reading through these here. Oh, Carolyn, okay, we have to be kind to her. Power's flickering due to high winds. I saw her posting earlier today that they were having very high winds in the area. And one lady was moving out of her part of her house because she had a 60-foot tree she was afraid was going to fall on it. So, but anyway, this is just an Olio. I mean, a mixture of odds and ends. And, I appreciate people joining to go back. Anybody see anything new for the first time?
I did. There were lots of great shots at Disneyland and Knott's and all your other exhibits.
Yeah, I like going to the crazy weird things. Like the shot of the stuff behind the Illinois pavilion. It's never going to change anything, anybody's life or anything. But it's like, wow, I've seen so many pictures of the Unisphere. Bill Young, the guy that I wrote the 64 books, and at one point he said to me, if I see one more picture of the Unisphere taken from the New York State Tower, I'm going to scream. So, all right, I'll write that chapter, But
it was neat seeing the 39 fair in color. You don't get many color shots of that.
no, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't anything important. It's not goodbye. Yeah, I've got quite a few of them that I'm working on, and it just takes longer because, like I said, for whatever reason, a bunch of them turn to a yellowish sort of color, but it's working. I'm actually thinking about, should I try to do a book on the 64 World's Fair in color? I have to see the publisher would be interested in doing that, because I have so many nice, not color at night, night views. So many, yeah, I got so many neat night views of the fair that it could be fun to do something with.
Hey, Bill, kind of go along with Don's comment there about the color photographs of 39. There was one that was really striking. It was earlier on, but it was a portrait shot. And then you had zoomed in, I think on the next frame, you had zoomed in on the couple in the, in the attire of the day, and you were commenting about how they looked. But it was that particular picture, which I thought was extremely striking because of the color balance was very good. You'd said you were able to get it, but it was also the blue sky was vibrant. A lot of the photographs, the sky is always washed out for some reason, but that particular one, I thought the sky was nice and blue and vibrant. It was a good photograph. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, was it?
It was early on.
Yeah. Well, let's see if I can find it again here for a second. Sorry.
Actually, I remember seeing one with the sky being rather stunning.
Yeah, I think I know which one here. 1 second. Okay. Share screen.
Was it the one with the guy and had a little kid with a Corvette?
This one?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that looks like it was taken today.
Yeah, sometimes they've held up really well. It's it's you wonder how these things were stored, and you start thinking about how long ago some of this stuff was too. It's long time ago. Echoing.
Well, we're looking almost 85 years ago.
Yeah, let me just let's see. Do people see a picture of Brazil here?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is an example of how one of these things will look unrestored. I don't know where the echo is coming from. But
I'm just got an open mic.
Yeah. So this is like this will be the raw scan of it. This is where I scan it with the color correction on. But that's not what I'm going to be happy with for the end result. So I'm going to go back. So again, this is flower gardens here, and again with the color correction. A bird show, but you can see again an awful lot of yellow in a lot of these pictures. Then here, they've got mold and stuff on them, so I'm going to take all that out. I'll also sharpen them up. So basically I scan them twice, just to, with the color correction turned off and then the color correction turned on, and then I try to work on improving it from there. So I've got quite a few of them. The trouble is, let's see if I've got the latest batch here.
Well, another thing too, it depends on the way, the direction the picture was taken in. If you were looking towards the light source of in any direction, it's going to be a blown out sky. If the light source is behind you, then you get a nice blue sky if it's a clear sky.
Yeah, I don't know who's the echo is coming from.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, here's an example of the role I'm working on right now. So he's got shots of the fair at night, parachute jumps lit up and that sort of thing. And again, very, very glad he got these. Some of these things don't show up in many pictures at all. A lot of people don't know that there was actually a full-size roller coaster at the fair. So we're over at the lake amusement area here. And this, again, if you put on the auto color correct, and this is where I'm trying to figure out how to balance between them. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll use a technique called high dynamic range, and I'll take the dark one and the light one and put them together and try to meld and mesh them. But you can see he was using a tripod because you could see the lights, the headlights on the highway, just how long his exposure was as the cars traveled down it. So, but well, more stuff to work on.
Well, that autocorrect one is not very good, because I think what it's also trying to do is take into account exposure, unless that's a part of the factor of it or not. And it's brightening it up. I can tell from that photograph, because it was a long exposure, that it was photographed during the sunset hour, where the skies really get blue. And another thing is, this particular photographer may have used polarizing filters as well too, to darken the sky and get rid of some of the haze that would generate from it without using it. So I just thought it was a very good photograph, nice and clean and crisp, and looked like today.
Yeah, I only use the auto color one maybe 1% of the time. Where it really helps with the auto color ones on some of the pictures, when it's really, really, really dark and really, really like blue or cyan, they can help pull some of the details back out. But what I'll actually do, like I had one, I have a picture from Expo 67 where it was inside the Netherlands pavilion, and there was a diorama of a model, ships and everything, and then a picture in the background. And I basically took both pictures and I just spliced them together, because one of them was overexposed for the model, was actually underexposed for the model, and overexposed for the thing in the background. So I just, okay, I'll clone the right one here on top of the other one. I'll put them together, and and sometimes you just have to live with the best you can. But every now and then I'll realize I've just spent an hour and a half, and what the hell did I do that for?
It is something of a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Well, I've talked about it. I got into this a lot of time when I was working full time, and I had a job that just consumed me, and laying people off and shutting down this operation, doing this and everything. When I was doing this and taking a scratch across some unknown lady's face at Disneyland, I didn't think about any of the job stuff for an hour. It's just, how am I going to clone this part of her mouth over to here and switch it around and move, and it was just, like I said, other people take up drinking. I took up Photoshop, and I don't know which one's worse for your health or but whatever. But I just enjoy the challenge of it. And there's some people that are so much better at it than me, that I look at some of the things they do and go, how the hell did they do that? But yeah, I have fun with it. So I hope people enjoy it. I think next week, Expo 67, and I had some other odds and ends. And I think I may have some more knots pictures I didn't get to today, Glenn. So we'll see if we can do some more knots for you next week.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. It was a great show. Loved it.
Oh,
I do have to thank you for mentioning right palm up, left palm down, because when you mentioned it, I went out just to see. It's very, very hard to find a book to find, and I've been wanting my own copy for a while. There was one copy on Amazon today.
was there?
Yes, and selling at the original price too. So I snarfed that puppy while you were talking. You may have seen me. So it's winging its way to me. So.
That's great. Yeah, it's a really fun book. I mean, the guy, you know, he went around the country looking for many of these things on a personal tour. You know, he did it for I think like 8-10 years or something, and then he had other people, you know, send in pictures of where they were or whatever. And it's just, you know, real kitschy stuff from the 60s of all the giant mufflers, and some of them are Indian chiefs, and there's a couple there's a few of them that are giant women, and you know, that sort of thing. So I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, it's being a Route 66 aficionado, it's actually a well sought after book in the Route 66 community.
Oh,
So, yeah, because there are a lot of muffler men along the route.
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to getting a look at it. But yeah, your mention of it, just I'll check. There was exactly one copy. It's mine. So.
Well, you know, you could always, if you're in the mood, you could always go out and buy copies of other books I mentioned. There's a book on the 1939 World's Fair that's really good, and the 60s.
I think I have half your stuff here. We'll add more as the days go on.
Yeah, you know, I had somebody one time tell me, he says, you've got to stop writing books. And I said, why? Because I'm out of bookshelves. I said, then do what I did. If you look at my library, they're all stacked in heaps on the floor because I ran out of bookshelves a decade ago. So, well, I hope folks have a great day, and we're hopefully getting some more rain out here. We had a little bit of rain this week, but they're predicting a bunch of rain on Monday and Tuesday. So please, everybody, keep your fingers crossed for us, and we'll hope it turns out to be a wet one. So, Glenn, you gonna do a rain dance for us?
Have to go back to the Indian village.
Well, if we can bring up the movies and see how it was done. Well, great. I hope everybody has a great week. And for the folks that are in snowy areas, enjoy. Oh, Tom is just asking, anybody want to share any memories of Alice Davis? Glenn, did you work with her at all? Glenn might be muted there. Yeah, basically, I met Alice only maybe once or twice at events. She had retired from Disney by the time that I started there, but she and Mark were just lovely people to talk to. And you know, him being one of the 9 old men and everything, he had retired again. When I started there, I think the only ones of the old 9 old men still there were Frank and Ollie. But they would come to various events, and it was fun to watch them get together, and they hadn't seen each other in a number of years, and they were like school kids kind of catch up with each other and what they were done. And you know, you could just see how much they were all, you know, fierce competitors at work, but friendly competitors in another way. I mean, they all wanted to get their moment on the screen, but you could tell that these guys all really had a lot of respect for each other. You know, some of them didn't like Ward Kimball too much, but
Ward was great.
Oh, Ward was great, but some of the others were just, you know, he
was just a little kooky.
He tended to dominate a room, shall we say?
I discovered that when I had the chat window open and I tried to unmute, it wouldn't unmute. So that's why I was talking, but you weren't hearing me.
Oh, that's interesting.
But anyway, yes, I did work with Mark. I met Alice a number of times, but Mark and I worked together on when we added new scenes to the Jungle Cruise. And he did a couple of things that never went. He had a show for American Adventure that was totally different. And he was just a great guy to work with.
Yeah, nice people. So
yeah.
The book that came out of him, there was a 2-volume set of his artwork, had a lot of his work from the Jungle Cruise you were talking about when you guys redid it.
Yeah.
Am I still on? We added 5 scenes. That was when they put in the elephants and the hornbill and a water buffalo and things like that. And I made soundtracks for all that. And he sat right with me and we figured out how to do it. That was before we had a full sound effects library and person full time. But yeah, it was really interesting. He could hear the sounds in his head. And so I had to figure out how to create what he wanted. Another one we did was the peg leg parrot that was down in the, it was like a Barker bird, they called it, in front of the pirate ride in Florida. And we brought in a number of people and music tracks and recorded it and all that. And then as an interstitial between the little skits, he wanted some parrot squawks. And he said, I wish we could get a real parrot. And I said, well, I have an African gray parrot at home. And so I recorded my parrot and brought it in and edited that together. And it went in. And one day my wife was down there with me and she was standing there watching it. And the cast member said, oh, you like our parrot? And she says, well, actually, it's my parrot. So I still got this thing on here. Let me.
Do you get royalty checks every time he squawks?
No, I wish. Let me find.
Yeah, the book on Mark Davis is great.
I didn't see me.
Glad to contribute to it.
I'm in it, I think. A friend of mine gave me a copy of it and I haven't opened it yet, but working with Merrick, I think his name is, that wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came and interviewed me and we talked about some of the things I just mentioned. And
That's neat.
so I'll have to get into it. It's sitting on my shelf unwrapped.
It's exceptional. It's a lot to read, but
it's like 2 volumes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, guy had a hell of a career. My goodness.
Well,
Thanks all, and I guess next week we'll go back to more hodgepodge or whatever. Oh, Richard, I got the stuff next week. Are you able to do the stuff on Frank Buck for us next week?
Yeah, that would be fine. It's about probably 10 minutes. I haven't timed it or anything, and but I'd be glad to do it.
Yeah, this if we go back to the thing of don't tease the monkey, it will have an explanation on what happens when your theme park goes wrong.
Basically, I've wondered about this because I've heard a little back chatter about when things went wrong with you Disney folks. And it just occurs to me that there's so much effort and artifice put up that it's very easy for things to go wrong. So I could think of a theme Saturday could be among you Disneyites saying, well, this went wrong and this went wrong, because I think there are a lot of interesting stories there.
You know what's really interesting is you think about how many times you do things and that you think you get it right. And Glenn might appreciate this. Do you remember the first week of Epcot? What a real mess it was without any cue lines for things.
oh yeah.
I mean, we argued, you'd be in a meeting and you said, where are all the lines going to be? And they were so convinced that things would move so quickly that the lines wouldn't be there. Well, just like we saw in some of the pictures, people go to where the attractions are and the lines would get bad. I remember outside Energy Pavilion in particular, Energy had all these different cubes that would move and the big video effects in the pre-show, and they would work about 5% of the time. And then dinosaurs would break down, and then you'd have to go back out, and then you'd have to come back, see the same pre-show, dinosaur would break down, over and over. So the line for people to get into Energy was insane, and there was no lines, no queue. I mean, so everybody's just this giant blob pushing, shoving, trying to get in. So about a week after, I mean, it's probably about 4 days after opening day, there were guys out drilling holes in the concrete to start putting stanchions in all over the place, because whoever had been in charge at that point didn't like stanchions and wasn't going to put them in. And now operations was screaming for stanchions. Just little things like that. You look at it and say, how did they not do that on day one?
Well, I don't know if you knew about it, but Spaceship Earth had these vehicles that up in the top of the ball, they would rotate, and they couldn't get it to work right. So they had 2 guys full time making those things turn around with flashlights underneath their track. That was their job for the whole shift, for the whole operation.
Yeah, and I understand it was also very hot up there for them.
Well, I know I climbed the stairs up there 3 times in one day. And it was 18 floors. It's before they had the elevators working.
Right.
And it was hot up there, especially in the summer.
Yeah, and then when the ride's running and you're turning the thing around,
Yeah.
With the voice saying, please don't worry, we're turning you around to go back downhill over and over and over again.
Well, they put that in because I don't know if this is true, but I believe it's true. There was a guy and he had his kids in the car in front of him, and the thing turned around, but he didn't realize it turned around. And all he saw was this like engine unit that was between the vehicles. And he thought somehow that his kids had turned upside down. So he was freaking out and panicking, trying to get to them and everything. So that's why they added that little spiel there that says your car is turning around. It's all fine. You're back on visual.
Yeah, I always wondered. It just seemed like the car begins to turn around and a voice tells me your car is turning around. It's like, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. But
right.
Yeah, apparently somebody got scared, it's like you said. So
yeah, no, there's so many things you think of after time. You go, well, why did they do that? Or I can think of a whole bunch of them. I don't know how many the company once mentioned, but yeah, it's definitely like, well, that didn't work quite as planned.
Yeah, well, maybe you better edit this part off when you post it.
Yeah. How about the spaceship? Sorry, what you call it? Space Mountain in Florida breaking tailbone.
Oh my goodness, Daddy, he ate a bunch. Papa.
What is that?
I don't know, but he's going away.
Wow.
I don't know what was going on with that, but he is gone. So, well, anyway, I guess the rest of us should follow him out the door and, be sure, to put your 3D glasses back in the bucket. And we thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
thanks,
Thank
Bill.
you, Bill.
Bill.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.
Thanks, Bill.
See you later.